Marlena Briggs stood frozen in the school hallway. Fired without warning. Escorted out like a criminal, after solving a math problem none of the teachers could. Whispers spread. She must have stolen it. Her fingerprints were brilliance. But all they saw was a cafeteria worker who wasn't supposed to know. By nightfall her face was all over TikTok. But not for what she solved. For what they accused her of. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. At Blue Valley High School, tucked between rusting fences and half-mowed football fields, the days moved with mechanical rhythm. The morning bell rang sharp. Hallways flooded with echoing chatter. Teachers shuffled coffee mugs like lifelines. And in the basement-level cafeteria, where the scent of reheated pizza and powdered mashed potatoes clung to every surface, Marlena Briggs stood behind the steam line like a ghost in plain sight. She'd worked here for 13 years. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, gliding silently past the janitors, with a thermos of chamomile tea and a book tucked under her arm. Always hardcover, always thick with symbols and formulas, no one cared to notice. She wore the same navy blue smock 5 days a week, kept her afro pinned tight beneath a faded hairnet, and smiled at every student who walked past her line. But her smile was rarely returned. No one knew that. Before Marlena was ladling green beans onto styrofoam trays, she was solving differential equations for fun. No one knew that the calculator in her locker wasn't for budgeting groceries, but for testing new theories she read online. Because no one ever at Blue Valley cafeteria workers didn't exist beyond the plastic gloves and hairnets. Especially not black ones. Teachers rushed past her without eye contact. Students left their trash on tables inches from the bin. Administrators nodded with tight smiles but never used her name. In fact, most of them thought her name was Martha. She never corrected them. She'd stopped trying a long time ago. But Marlena noticed everything. She noticed how the black students were always asked to show their hall passes, even when they were with groups. She noticed how the only black male teacher was consistently left off email chains. She noticed the way Coach Hanning locked the vending machines before lunch when the kids from East End started arriving. She also noticed how no one noticed her. The school had a way of smoothing over its failures with glossy posters about inclusion and diversity, but when it came time to promote someone from within, the same names got called. When it came time to listen, the same voices were silenced. Marlena had once suggested a better food rotation system to reduce waste. The manager looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "You stick to scooping tater tots, Marlena," he'd said with a forced chuckle. "Let the rest of us handle the logistics." So she scooped. Quietly. Diligently. Invisibly. And yet at night after she'd mopped the last spill from the sticky tile floor, Marlena went home to her tiny apartment, where the walls were lined with math books and notebooks full of solutions no one had ever read. She didn't have a college degree, couldn't afford to finish it after her father passed, but numbers had always spoken to her. They were the only language that never judged. Equations made sense. People didn't. Then came Tuesday. It started like every other day. She unpacked frozen burritos, counted napkin dispensers, wiped trays, and prepped the lunch line before 10:30 a.m. By 11:05, the first wave of students surged through the double doors in a swarm of gossip, backpacks, and AirPods. The lunchroom was a theater of social hierarchy. Athletes at the back, theater kids by the windows, freshmen clumped near exits, and Marlena, always stationed at the end of line B, served chili and rice with quiet precision. It wasn't until cleanup that something caught her eye. A crumpled paper lay next to an untouched carton of milk on table 12, the same table where the varsity basketball team usually sat. It was half soaked with juice, the corners curled. Most staff would have tossed it without a glance. But Marlena saw numbers. Lots of them. She plucked it gently from the tray pile, smoothing it out with gloved fingers. It was a calculus test covered in red X's and margin notes. A junior named Skylar Dugan had scored 28%. The questions were advanced, multivariable integrals, curve sketching, application-based word problems. But to Marlena, they read like a familiar melody. She looked around. The lunchroom was nearly empty now, the echo of a mop bucket rolling across the floor. Her coworker Janice was humming off-key in the kitchen. No one was watching. So Marlena reached for a clean sheet of inventory paper, sat at a nearby table, and began solving the test, slowly at first, then faster, her hand moving like it had a memory of its own. Each question unfurled beneath her pen. The variables danced. The logic clicked. She didn't even need to check her work. It felt right. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that someone was watching. From across the room, behind the faculty fridge, stood Mr. Gregory Hale, a young Algebra 2 teacher just out of grad school. He'd come down to heat up his leftover pad thai. What caught his attention wasn't Marlena's presence. It was her posture. The way she leaned into the problem, the confidence of her pen strokes. Curious, he approached. "Hey," he called gently, expecting her to look up startled. But Marlena didn't flinch. "Sorry," she said, sliding the paper aside. "Didn't mean to touch a student's test. It was left behind." Hale squinted at the page she'd scribbled on. His eyes widened. You solved these?" Marlena nodded slowly. He looked at her, then back at the test. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. "These aren't beginner problems," he said almost defensively. "This is AP Calculus BC. Who showed you how to do this?" "I taught myself," she replied. "Just numbers. They make sense." Hale blinked, suddenly uncomfortable. "You're saying you self-studied college-level math while working here?" She nodded again. There was a pause. "Well, I mean, it's just this is a student's test," Hale muttered, eyes narrowing. "I should probably take this. It's not appropriate for staff to be going through confidential materials." Without another word, he snatched both papers from the table, stuffed them into his binder, and walked briskly toward the kitchen. Marlena sat still, her fingers frozen midair, a sting of shame creeping up her neck. She hadn't done anything wrong, but something told her she was about to be treated like she had. 30 minutes later, as she was wiping down the juice dispensers, 2 security officers walked in. They didn't say her name. They didn't explain. They simply asked her to step into the principal's office for a quick clarification. When she asked why, they exchanged glances and said, "Just routine." As she walked past the kitchen, Janice looked up confused. "Everything okay?" Marlena offered a tight smile. "Yeah, just a quick question." But inside, her heart thudded with something old and familiar. The feeling that no matter what she did, she would never be seen as someone worth listening to. In the principal's office, Marlena would soon find herself facing not a conversation, but an accusation, one that would make her question whether being brilliant, while black, was more dangerous than being invisible. The principal's office smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, the kind of scent that clung to institutions built on control. Marlena sat on the far end of a too-shiny table, her hands resting quietly in her lap. 2 security officers stood by the door, their hands folded, not aggressive but unmistakably guarding the space between her and the world. Across from her sat Principal Keenan, a white man in his late 50s, with a thinning hairline and a habit of polishing his glasses whenever he was unsure of what to say. He did that now. "Marlena," he began, with a tone that pretended warmth. "Mr. Hale came to me with a bit of confusion. He says you were found in the cafeteria working on a student's calculus test. Is that correct?" She nodded. "It was left behind on a table. I just looked at it. I was on break." Keenan exchanged a quick glance with the younger teacher, who stood awkwardly in the corner. Mr. Hale's jaw was tight. His fingers fidgeted with the edge of his binder. "You looked at it," Keenan repeated. "But you didn't just look, did you? You filled out the entire test. Is that accurate?" Marlena hesitated, not because she was unsure, but because of the way his tone curved upward, like she was being caught doing something mischievous, not admirable. "Yes," she said. "I finished the questions. I didn't mean any harm." Mr. Hale leaned forward. "But why?" "Because it was unfinished," she said quietly, "and I understood it." That word "understood" hung in the air, like smoke. Keenan's eyebrows lifted slightly, then flattened into polite skepticism. "Marlena, you're a cafeteria worker," he said, his voice soft but patronizing. "These problems are AP-level calculus. Not many students, or even some teachers, can solve them easily. You're saying you just knew how." She met his gaze, calm and steady. "Yes. I've always loved math. It makes sense to me." A long silence followed. Then Hale spoke, his tone sharper now. "With respect, Principal, I don't think this is about curiosity. When I saw the test, she had perfect solutions, down to the notation. That's not something someone just picks up. It looked like she had prior access." "Prior access?" Marlena repeated, frowning. Keenan leaned back in his chair. "He means, I know what he means. she interrupted, her voice cool. He thinks I stole the test answers. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. She hadn't been accused yet, but she'd felt the shape of the accusation long before it landed. Keenan cleared his throat. No one's accusing anyone. We just need to understand what happened. The test wasn't public, and Mr. Hale says your work matched an online key from a copyrighted material set. Something not available to the general public. I've never seen any online key, Marlena said, her pulse quickening. I solved it myself. Hale gave a small laugh. The kind people give when they don't believe you, but don't want to sound cruel. I'm sorry, but come on. These were complex integrals. You'd need advanced training. Where would you even learn that? For a moment, she considered answering honestly. About the nights she'd spent teaching herself from borrowed textbooks, the free MIT OpenCourseWare videos she watched while ironing uniforms, the puzzles she created for fun on napkins. But she did it, because even if she did, they wouldn't believe her. Instead, she said softly, I read. I practice. That's all. Keenan sighed, rubbing his temple. Marlena, I appreciate your cooperation, but until we sort this out, I'll need to document the incident. Mr. Hale, can you please leave us for a moment? The teacher hesitated, then stepped out. The door closed with a muted click. For several seconds, the room was silent, except for the hum of the ceiling fan. Marlena, Keenan said more gently now. You've been here a long time. Everyone respects your hard work, but you understand how this looks, right? We can't have staff accessing student materials. Parents would— Parents? She cut in, startled. Do you think I'd risk my job over some test? I was cleaning tables. That paper was trash to everyone but me. He nodded, almost regretful. I understand. But perception matters here. Perception. The word slid through her like a blade. That's what people like Keenan always said when they didn't want to name prejudice. Perception was what got people like her doubted, dismissed, and disbelieved. Just then, a knock sounded. The door opened slightly. Hale again. Sir, the district superintendent is here for the annual walkthrough. Should I? Keenan blinked. Now? Of all times? Before he could answer, the door opened wider, and Gloria Ellsworth walked in. Sharp gray suit, tablet in hand, and eyes that missed nothing. She was in her mid-40s, the youngest superintendent in the county, and one of the few black women ever to hold the role. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said, her tone brisk. Continue. Keenan stammered. We were just handling a minor, staff issue. Ellsworth's gaze flicked from him to Marlena, then to the guards by the door. Looks more than minor to me. What's going on? Hale jumped in, a cafeteria worker. Ms. Briggs was found completing the student's calculus exam. The accuracy of her answers suggests she had access to restricted materials. Ellsworth arched an eyebrow. You're saying she cheated? Not exactly, Hale said quickly. I'm saying it's suspicious. Ellsworth looked at Marlena. And your side. Marlena swallowed hard. It was left on a lunch table. I picked it up. I solved it because I could. That's all. Ellsworth studied her, really looked at her longer than anyone had in years. The silence in the room grew taut.
Then she said, Show me.
Marlena blinked. Nah, show me, Ellsworth repeated. There's a whiteboard right there. You said you solved it because you could. Prove it. Keenan hesitated. Gloria, I don't think that's— But Ellsworth didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on Marlena. Marlena rose slowly. She hadn't touched a whiteboard since community college, but the moment she picked up the marker, her body remembered. The scent of dry erase ink filled the air. She took a breath and began writing. Equation by equation. The board came alive. She didn't rush. Her handwriting was deliberate, almost elegant, numbers cascading into logic. Hale's frown deepened with every line. Keenan stopped fiddling with his glasses. Even the guards leaned forward slightly. When Marlena reached the final step, she turned around, the marker trembling faintly in her hand. Ellsworth walked up, examined the work, then nodded slowly. That's correct. Hale's voice cracked slightly. That's impossible. She must have seen— Ellsworth cut him off. You verified it? I wrote the test myself, he said defensively. I'd know. Then she didn't cheat, Ellsworth said flatly. She's gifted. The room froze. Keenan shifted uncomfortably. Gifted or not, Gloria, there's protocol. Protocol? She snapped, her tone like flint. You called security on a cafeteria worker for being intelligent. Keenan's face flushed red. Hale looked at the floor. For the first time in hours, Marlena allowed herself to breathe. But the relief lasted only a heartbeat. Because just as Ellsworth turned to leave, Hale blurted out, "You're making a mistake. This is going to look like favoritism. You defending her just because she's—" The word hung there. Unfinished. Poisonous. Ellsworth turned sharply. "Just because she's what, Mr. Hale?" He paled. "That's not what I—" "Finish your sentence." But he didn't. He didn't have to. Everyone knew. Marlena felt it too. That invisible line between respect and suspicion. Between proof and prejudice. She'd crossed it by daring to exist outside her assigned box. Ellsworth closed her tablet with a snap. "This conversation is over," she said. "Ms. Briggs, you'll hear from me soon. Mr. Hale, I'd advise you to reconsider your assumptions before you find yourself under review." She left the office. The guards followed. Marlena stood alone now, clutching her hands to stop their shaking. She should have felt vindicated. But instead, she felt exposed. The whispers had already started outside the office door. Students passing by, teachers glancing in, a cafeteria worker writing calculus on the whiteboard. It was the kind of story that would ripple through every hallway before the final bell. And yet that night, as she walked home under the flickering streetlights, she couldn't shake the question burning in her chest. Why did it feel like being right had made her more of a target than being invisible ever did? The next morning, Marlena's phone buzzed, not with an apology, but with a district-wide memo accusing her of academic misconduct. The same people who doubted her intelligence were now calling her a fraud, and the real storm was just beginning. The next morning, at Blue Valley High School began with a tremor no one could quite place. A ripple moving just beneath the surface of its otherwise scripted routine. Teachers gathered in the lounge, whispered between sips of burnt coffee, glancing toward the cafeteria more than once. Students passed half-formed rumors in the halls, something about the lunch lady, something about math. Marlena felt it the moment she stepped onto campus. Eyes lingered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the janitor, who normally offered her a quiet nod, kept his head down. She walked the length of the hallway toward the kitchen, her soft-soled shoes clicking against the linoleum, like a metronome counting down to something she couldn't see, but felt coming. At 9:03 a.m., her name crackled through the overhead speaker. "Ms. Briggs to the principal's office. Immediately, please." It wasn't the words. It was the tone. Clipped, sterile, rehearsed. Not an invitation. A summons. She wiped her hands, untied her apron, and left the kitchen. The walk to the office was longer than it should have been. Students brushed past her like she was a fixture, not a person. The few who made eye contact quickly looked away. She passed a group of seniors in varsity jackets, who smirked and whispered as she passed. She knew what they were thinking. What's the lunch lady doing in the main building? When she reached the office, the door was already half open. Inside sat Principal Keenan, two assistant principals, both white, and Mr. Hale, the math teacher whose disbelief yesterday had fermented into something more potent. Keenan gestured to the chair across from him. "Marlena, have a seat." She sat. "No pleasantries, no small talk." Keenan began. "I want to be clear. This is not a disciplinary meeting. Not yet. But we have some concerns that require clarification." "Concerns?" she echoed. "The nature of your interaction with that calculus exam," said Vice Principal Morgan, flipping through a folder as if facts had weight only when on paper. "You claimed to solve it on your own, without prior access. Is that still your statement?" "Yes," Marlena said, voice firm. "That's exactly what happened." And yet Hale interjected, "Your answers matched not only the answer key we use internally, which isn't publicly available, but the same sequence of solutions, right down to the method of substitution. That's a statistical impossibility." "It's not impossible," Marlena said, "if two people know how to solve the same problem. Math has patterns." Hale scoffed. "Patterns don't account for stylistic choices. You used the same error I deliberately placed in question 6 as a trap. You mirrored my key, not just the answers, the process." Marlena blinked. "What error?" "Exactly," he said, as if that proved something. Principal Keenan leaned forward. "Marlena, this is where it gets tricky. If you accessed confidential materials, that's a violation of district ethics policies. It puts the school's integrity at risk. This could be interpreted as academic misconduct." The room tightened like a noose. The accusation wasn't just offensive. It was surgical, measured, dressed in professionalism but rooted in disbelief. Marlena's voice wavered. but didn't break. You don't believe I could have solved it on my own? No one's saying that, Morgan began. Yes, you are, she said louder now. Because I'm not supposed to be smart. I'm supposed to serve trays. I'm supposed to wear gloves and hairnets, not hold markers and solve equations. Marlena, Keenan tried, but she cut him off. Let me guess. If I'd guessed wrong on half the test, you'd say I was just curious. But because I got everything right, suddenly I'm a criminal? Her words hung in the air. Hale shifted in his seat. With all due respect, we're just trying to get the facts. No, she said, quieter now. You're trying to put me in a box I've already outgrown. And that scares you. A silence followed, that no one dared fill. And then another voice, unexpected. Shh, scares them, or threatens their comfort. All heads turned. Standing in the doorway was Gloria Ellsworth, the district superintendent, holding a folder and wearing the kind of expression that made men twice her size rethink their posture. She had arrived early for her scheduled walkthrough. No one noticed. No one had thought to check if she'd been listening from the hall. Now they knew. I heard enough, she said, stepping inside. Superintendent Ellsworth. Keenan stood quickly, flustered. We didn't No, you didn't, she cut in. And maybe that's why things like this happen. She turned to Marlena. Ms. Briggs, would you excuse us for a moment? Marlena stood, slow and deliberate, heart still thudding. Their eyes met briefly, and in that look was something rare. Not pity, not patronizing curiosity, but recognition. She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. Inside, voices rose, muffled but sharp. 10 minutes passed. Then 12. A secretary avoided looking at her. A counselor walked by pretending to check his phone. The air felt dense, like something about to break. Finally, the door opened. Keenan looked like he'd swallowed vinegar. Ellsworth stepped out. Marlena, she said quietly, please walk with me. They moved through the corridor together, slowly, ignoring the stares, the murmurs. She didn't explain, she didn't comfort. She simply walked. When they reached the stairwell, Ellsworth paused. You don't owe them proof, she said. But if you choose to prove it, do it loud, so no one forgets. Marlena swallowed hard. And if they still don't believe me? Ellsworth's voice was low, but unshakable. Then they'll reveal more about themselves than about you. But even as she said the words, Marlena knew the damage was done. She could feel it, in the way people looked at her differently now. Like she had stepped out of a role they never imagined she could leave. And instead of celebrating her, they questioned her, feared her, doubted her. That day, she returned to the cafeteria, but everything felt different. Colleagues stared without speaking. Students whispered. Rumors twisted. Now she had hacked the school system. Now she stole tests. Now she used AI to cheat. By lunchtime, even the food tasted like shame. She finished her shift with mechanical silence, her body moving through the routine, but her mind somewhere else caught between indignation and disbelief. How easily they had turned. How quickly brilliance had become a threat. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the test she had memorized, every question still vivid in her mind. The same test that had unmasked her intelligence had also painted a target on her back. The next morning, she didn't check her phone until after her tea had gone cold. When she finally did, her hands trembled. There, in her inbox, was a message she hadn't expected. From a name she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Saw the footage. We need to talk immediately." Attached was a link, a video file. She clicked, and what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. A video secretly filmed during the whiteboard session was already spreading online, and within hours it would ignite a firestorm neither the school nor Marlena could ever contain. Gloria Ellsworth had always believed that change within the system was possible, if not inevitable. She had climbed the ladder with careful steps, refusing to be labeled an outsider even when she was the only black woman in the room. As the superintendent of Blue Valley County Schools, she had survived boardroom politics, diffused racial tensions, and fought for policy reform from behind closed doors. But this moment, standing in Principal Keenan's office, staring at a cafeteria worker being interrogated for being too intelligent, was different. It was personal. She had heard enough before she even stepped in. The tone, the doubt, the dismissal. She knew the script. She had lived it in boardrooms, where her every word was measured against invisible standards. But something about Marlena Briggs's quiet defiance, the steadiness in her voice, stirred something deeper. It wasn't just the racism, it was the system's reflex to defend itself, even at the cost of truth. Back in the office, after Marlena stepped out, Gloria leveled her eyes at the three men seated before her. "Let me be clear," she began, each word deliberate. "You brought security to question a cafeteria worker over solving a test, not stealing it, not altering grades, but answering questions. Correct?" Keenan shifted in his seat. "It's not about her solving it. It's about how she solved it. We suspect You suspect her," Gloria snapped, "because it doesn't fit your expectations, not because you have evidence." Mr. Hale interjected. "I don't see how this is productive. We're just trying to maintain integrity." "Integrity?" Gloria's voice hardened. "Do you question every student who gets a perfect score? Do you bring in security when a white teacher demonstrates skill above their pay grade?" Silence. She shook her head. "You didn't bring her here to understand her. You brought her here to reduce her, to remind her of her place." Morgan looked uncomfortable. "We didn't mean..." "But you did. And that's the problem." She turned toward the whiteboard in the corner of the room, still stained with half-erased formulas from yesterday's faculty meeting. "Set up a problem," she said flatly. Keenan blinked. "What?" "A real calculus problem," she said, louder now. "Something from your advanced curriculum. Put it on the board." Hale hesitated. "Superintendent, this really isn't..." "No, Mr. Hale." He stood reluctantly, uncapped a dry erase marker, and began writing. A series of multivariable integrals, a rotational solid problem, and a complex optimization equation. He stepped aside with theatrical reluctance. Gloria opened the door. "Ms. Briggs, please come back in." Marlena re-entered the room slowly, unsure of what she was walking into. The air had changed. Keenan and Hale looked tense. Gloria simply pointed at the board. "I'd like you to solve these, Marlena. Take your time." There was no ceremony, no crowd, just the quiet hum of the HEFAC and the click of the marker in her hand. She stared at the first problem, rolled the marker in her fingers once, then stepped forward. It was like watching music being composed in real time. Her movements were fluid but precise. She approached the equations with a quiet confidence that neither rushed nor hesitated. For every curve she drew, every integral sign she closed, her logic was unmistakable. The room watched in a silence so thick it was almost reverent. By the time she reached the third problem, Hale's arms were crossed, jaw clenched. Keenan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Morgan simply stared, lips parted slightly. Gloria, however, just watched. Still, silent, immovable. When Marlena finally turned around, the board was filled with her handwriting. Flawless steps, clean structure, elegant reasoning. "I believe that's all three," she said quietly, setting the marker down. Mr. Hale opened his mouth, then shut it again. Gloria turned to him. "Is it correct?" He nodded stiffly. "Yeah." She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. She looked at Marlena. "Would you be okay if I shared this? I think people need to see it." Marlena hesitated. "Why?" "Because what just happened," Gloria said, "shouldn't be hidden behind closed doors, and people like you shouldn't be invisible." The video wasn't meant to go viral. Gloria had recorded it discreetly on her tablet, the whiteboard, Marlena's back, the problems unfolding, no flashy edits, no hash. She uploaded it to a small educational forum that night, attaching a single sentence. "Gifted minds don't always come with titles. Watch this." It spread like fire. Within hours, the clip had migrated to Reddit, then TikTok, then Twitter. It wasn't just the math that mesmerized viewers. It was the context, the way Marlena solved problems that baffled students nationwide. The way her cafeteria uniform contrasted with the chalk whiteboard of academia. The disbelief in the background. The elegance of the truth unfolding without apology. By midnight it had crossed 2 million views. By morning news outlets were calling the school. Some were fascinated. Others were furious. Why was a brilliant black woman working in a cafeteria? Why did the school question her instead of hiring her? Would this have happened if she were white? The internet had chosen its narrative, and it wasn't kind to Blue Valley High. In the break room, Marlena sat quietly with her tea, the video now playing on 3 phones around her. Her coworkers watched it like a movie. Janice, the fry cook, wiped a tear and said, "You were always special. They just didn't want to see it." Marlena didn't respond. She wasn't sure how she felt. The attention, the headlines, the labels. Genius. Underrated. Viral sensation. They didn't know her. They didn't know what it felt like to be doubted for being right. Across town, in a sterile district office, Gloria Ellsworth sat before a dozen angry emails from board members, parents, and one particularly vocal math department head. The pushback had begun. She undermined protocol. This paints the district in a bad light. She made us look incompetent. And yet Gloria didn't flinch. She knew the cost of disrupting a system wasn't just media noise. It was internal war, waged through cold emails, budget cuts, passive sabotage. But she was ready. She drafted a formal statement that read, "We stand by the intellectual contributions of every member of our staff, regardless of position. Discrimination, implicit or otherwise, will not be tolerated." She hit send. Her phone buzzed. A new email, from a name she didn't recognize. Subject: "We want to offer Ms. Briggs a paid fellowship." Immediately. It was signed by the CEO of a Silicon Valley tech company. But before she could respond, her assistant burst into the office. "You need to see this," she said breathlessly, holding out a phone. It was another video, one that hadn't been posted by Gloria. It showed the meeting from earlier, from a different angle. Someone else had recorded the confrontation. Only this one captured the full scene. The accusations, the disbelief, the faces of the men in the room as Marlena proved them wrong, the microaggressions, the silence, the moment of unraveling. It had been leaked anonymously, and it was spreading faster than the first. Within hours, the second video would eclipse the first, exposing not just Marlena's brilliance, but the systemic racism behind her humiliation, and setting off a nationwide reckoning, far beyond Blue Valley's control. By dawn, the world knew her name. The story of Marlena Briggs, the cafeteria worker who solved calculus problems on camera, had exploded beyond Blue Valley. It wasn't just trending in Virginia anymore, it was everywhere, from Twitter threads to cable news, from podcasts to morning shows. Everyone had an opinion about the villain behind the whiteboard. But the world didn't love Marlena. Not yet. It dissected her. Her face, warm brown, framed by a simple headscarf, was on thumbnails everywhere. Her hands gripping the marker. Her uniform, that deep blue smock that suddenly became a symbol of defiance. And of course, that voice, calm, measured, softly southern. Reporters replayed her every word like detectives analyzing evidence. "Notice how she pauses before answering," one commentator said on a daytime talk show. "That's what liars do. They calculate before speaking." Another anchor smirked into the camera. "And she claims she self-taught calculus? Come on, that's not realistic." By lunchtime, hashtags were splitting the internet in half. Marlena the Mind flooded with admiration, messages of hope, Black students posting photos of themselves studying. And opposite it, math fraud, led by skeptics who insisted the video was a stunt. Reddit threads filled with conspiracy theories. "She probably worked with the superintendent to go viral. She's an actress. That wasn't even her writing. My cousin teaches math and says her notation looked too perfect. That's AI generated." The cruelty spread fast because it was easy. It was easier to believe in deceit than in brilliance that didn't fit a stereotype. Even the local news station joined the chorus. A white anchor with polished hair smiled into the camera. In a story sparking both praise and controversy, cafeteria worker, Marlena Briggs is being hailed as a genius by some, but others question whether her sudden fame is, well, suspicious. That word suspicious repeated across headlines like a curse. Marlena had taken the day off. Gloria Ellsworth had insisted. "Stay home. Let the noise die down," she told her. "The internet moves on fast." But it didn't. Marlena sat by the window of her small apartment, the glow of her old phone illuminating her face. Notifications piled endlessly. Strangers praising her, strangers mocking her, journalists demanding interviews. Her inbox filled with messages that alternated between admiration and hate. "You're a role model. You're a liar. Prove it again. Go back to the kitchen where you belong." Every time her phone buzzed, her stomach clenched. By noon, someone had found her Facebook profile. Old photos resurfaced, her standing beside her late father at a church fundraiser, smiling with her hair natural and proud. Comment sections filled with bile. Of course she plays the victim card. Look at her, probably some activist pretending to be smart. Can she even spell calculus? For years Marlena had existed in silence, unnoticed. Now she existed too loudly, dissected by millions of voices, who had never met her. She turned on the TV out of habit. But the first thing she saw made her wish she hadn't. A panel discussion on CNN. Three talking heads. One of them, a white academic from a nearby university, leaned forward with an indulgent smile. I'm not saying she didn't solve the problems. I'm saying the context matters. Genius doesn't just come out of nowhere. There are genetic and educational factors. The moderator interjected. Are you suggesting a cafeteria worker can't be a mathematical genius? He chuckled, soft and smug. I'm saying it's improbable. Marlena muted the TV. She didn't cry. Not yet, but her chest ached with something deeper than anger. That hollow ache of being misunderstood on purpose. When Gloria called that evening, Marlena answered on the first ring. Are you okay? Gloria's voice was tight. I don't know, Marlena admitted. They're saying I lied. I know, Gloria said softly, and the district board isn't helping. They've issued a statement saying they're reviewing the authenticity of the video. I told them not to, but they're afraid of lawsuits. Authenticity? Marlena repeated. Like I'm fake? Gloria exhaled. I'm sorry, this is what happens when the story goes public before the system's ready for it. They'll never be ready for it, Marlena whispered. Outside, thunder rolled across the Virginia sky. Heavy and slow. The kind that warned of a storm that wouldn't pass quickly. She looked at the stack of notebooks on her table, pages of her equations, her sketches, her experiments with geometric theories. They had been her private sanctuary for years. Now they looked like evidence waiting to be dismissed. Gloria hesitated. I need to tell you something else. The video, both versions are under review by the district's legal team. They're considering taking them down. Taking them down? They think it'll calm the backlash. But Gloria paused. It'll also erase you from your own story. Marlena stared at the phone. So I'm too smart to clean tables, but not smart enough to be believed. The silence between them was long, heavy, unresolvable. Later that night, Marlena stepped outside her building for air. Rain had started, soft and steady. A neighbor she barely knew walked by, phone in hand, glancing at her, then looking away quickly, the same awkward avoidance that had followed her all week. When she returned inside, she noticed an envelope slid under her door. No return address, just her name, scrawled neatly in black ink. Inside was a single printed page. At the top, a screenshot of a Reddit post. A thread accusing her of being part of a race-baiting social experiment. Beneath it, a comment. If you're really that smart, prove it again. Live. Bet you can't. And below that, a photo of her apartment building. Marlena froze, her breath hitched. Someone had been here, close enough to take that picture. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Gloria calling back. Marlena, listen to me, Gloria said urgently. They're going to hold a press conference tomorrow. They're calling it a clarification session. I'll be there, but they're inviting you to speak. You don't have to. I will, Marlena said before Gloria could finish. Her voice was calm now, colder. If they want clarity, I'll give it to them. The next morning, the media flooded the school grounds. Satellite vans, reporters, cameras, all aimed at the front steps of Blue Valley High. Students peered from classroom windows, watching history unfold, where cafeteria trays had once ruled. Marlena arrived in her uniform. Not out of humility, but to remind them who they had overlooked. Inside in the auditorium, Principal Keenan sat flanked by district officials. The air hummed with tension. Gloria stood to the side, her arms crossed tightly, her expression unreadable. As Marlena stepped to the microphone, camera shutters clicked like applause. I never asked for any of this, she began, her voice steady but raw. I didn't ask to be tested. I didn't ask to be doubted. I just solved a problem because that's what I do. I solve things. The audience shifted. But the real problem, she continued, isn't math. It's belief. Who gets to be seen as smart? Who gets to be trusted when they say they know something? Keenan adjusted his tie. A few teachers exchanged nervous glances. I'm not a fraud, she said. I'm a worker. I'm a reader. I'm a human being who refuses to stay small just because it makes others comfortable. The room was silent. But silence on the internet never lasts. That night, clips from her speech dominated every social platform. Marlena Speaks trended. Then came the counterattack. A YouTuber posted a 20-minute analysis, claiming her performance was crafted for sympathy. An education blogger suggested the superintendent had used her to push a diversity agenda. And an anonymous account released partial school records, implying Marlena had once failed a college algebra course 20 years ago. As if that erased everything. The mob shifted from disbelief to discrediting. Her inbox filled again. This time, the hate was sharper. Caught you. Knew you were lying. Math isn't for people like you. Gloria called, but Marlena didn't answer. The noise was too much. She turned off her phone and sat in the dark. For a long time, she listened to the rain against the window, the only sound that didn't demand anything from her. She thought of her father, who once told her, "They'll always question your mind, baby, because they can't see it, but don't you let them shrink it." Somewhere deep inside, she realized the truth. The storm wasn't a reaction. It was a reckoning. She was no longer just a cafeteria worker who solved math problems. She had become a mirror reflecting the ugliness people didn't want to see. And mirrors, she knew, were often the first things broken. Her laptop buzzed suddenly. One final notification that slipped through her muted filters. An email. Subject: we need to meet. From Clinton Vance, CEO, Vance Tech Logistics. Marlena blinked. She knew that name. A billionaire known for funding educational reform. A man who had dropped out of MIT and built an empire predicting global shipping routes with AI. She opened it. The message was short. Saw your video. The math you did on that board wasn't just impressive. It mirrored an algorithm my engineers spent 6 months trying to optimize. You saw it intuitively. I think we should talk. She read it again, heart racing. As the internet tore her apart, the world's most powerful black tech CEO had just extended a hand, and with it a chance to turn her humiliation into something no one could ignore. Marlena stared at the email for a full 5 minutes before she moved. The message from Clinton Vance felt unreal. A billionaire tech mogul, a man who'd become a myth in black entrepreneurial circles. Known for his reclusive nature, Vance rarely spoke to media, never appeared at galas, and hadn't granted an interview in over 7 years. His reputation wasn't built on charisma, it was built on proof. Shipping algorithms that saved billions, logistics systems that made Amazon look clumsy, and a talent for spotting patterns no one else could see. And now, he'd spotted her. She clicked reply, hands trembling. Her response was simple, caution. Thank you for reaching out. I'm open to a conversation. Let me know what you have in mind. 30 minutes later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A deep, unhurried voice came through. Marlena Briggs? Yes. This is Clinton Vance. I don't waste time, so I'll get to it. What you did on that whiteboard, that wasn't just impressive. That was instinctive systems thinking. You didn't solve a math problem. You saw structure. You predicted behavior. She didn't know how to respond. I want to test something, he continued. My engineers at Vance Logistics have been working on an optimization model for a real-world issue. We're stuck. If you can give me a working solution in 24 hours, I'll wire you $100,000. No contracts, no tricks, just a problem and a deadline. Marlena blinked. You're offering me $100,000 for homework? For clarity, he said. To see if your mind really works the way I think it does. She hesitated. And if I fail, then I'll still respect that you tried, but I don't think you will. There was no arrogance in his tone, just certainty, like he'd already seen her solve it in another timeline. She agreed. Within minutes, she received a secure email, attached a 23-page logistics case study with charts, variable conditions, and a challenge at the end to reduce shipping waste in a dynamic warehouse environment, while maintaining delivery speeds and minimizing cost per mile. Marlena spent the first hour just reading. No pen, no laptop, just absorbing. The data was dense. Real numbers, real supply chain models, weather impact variables, fleet availability. It wasn't a test. It was a live corporate problem worth millions. But to her it was art. Her brain began breaking it apart like music. Each inefficiency felt like a bad note. She paced, muttered, and ran fingers along her bookshelf, until she pulled down an old spiral notebook, half filled with doodles and unsolved puzzles from years ago. By midnight, her small apartment looked like a math crime scene. Sticky notes lined the walls, formulas crossed napkins and junk mail. Her tea went cold twice. By sunrise, she had a plan, handwritten, color-coded, and rooted in patterns no software had spotted. She stared at her work, exhausted and unsure. Could it really be this simple? She scanned it into a PDF and sent it. Subject line: Solution 4. Then she fell asleep on the floor. When she woke, her phone had 12 missed calls. One was Gloria. The rest were from numbers she didn't recognize. But one text stood out, from a blocked sender. Zoom in 10. Check email. She jumped to her feet and logged in. Vance was already on camera when she joined the secure call. Plain white wall behind him. No flashy background. Just a black man in a black hoodie and wireframe glasses, staring at her like she was the only moving piece in a puzzle. "Marlena," he said. "Let me introduce you to my team." The screen split. 3 more windows opened. 2 women and a man, all in their 30s, all clearly brilliant. Their titles flashed briefly. Head of Data Integrity, Logistics Architect, Systems Optimization Lead. Vance gestured toward them. "These 3 built the model your solution replaced."
Marlena froze. What?
The woman in the top left spoke first. "We've been working on that case for 6 months. Your solution cut our variable costs by 22% in the first simulation." The man added, "And it predicted a supply cluster failure in week 14. Something we completely missed." Another window opened. A dashboard lit up with charts and graphs overlaying their discussion. Marlena's model was highlighted in green, theirs in red. Every metric favored hers. She stared, unsure whether to be proud or terrified. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Vance leaned closer. "Then don't say anything. Just listen." He clicked to a new slide. "A contract. I'm offering you a 6-month paid research residency with full access to our lab and engineers. You'll work on what you want. You'll live where you want. And you'll be paid more than every administrator who called you a fraud." Marlena blinked. "Why me?" "Because you see things the way I used to," he said. "Before I had to unlearn everything school told me about who was allowed to be brilliant." She exhaled. Not relief, not joy, but something heavier. Validation, maybe. Or the first taste of it. "I need to think about it," she said honestly. "Everything's moving too fast." "Of course," Vance replied. "But know this, you're not a hashtag to me. You're a system breaker. And system breakers don't get time. They take it." She logged off without saying goodbye, her heart racing, head spinning. For the first time in days, the narrative around her wasn't about whether she was lying. It was about what she could do. But the world outside her window hadn't changed. When she walked to the corner store later that evening, she noticed a flyer stapled to a telephone pole. Her face pixelated, taken from the viral video, with the words "fraud alert" in blocky font underneath. She tore it down without a word. At home, her mailbox had an envelope with no return address. Inside, a printed article titled "Why We Should Be Skeptical of Sudden Black Genius." No signature. No note. Just another reminder that her progress was never going to be just hers. She sat at her table, spread the flyer and article beside her, then placed Vance's contract next to them. 3 visions of her. One built on suspicion, one built on hatred, one built on possibility. But only one had her name spelled right. She took out her pen, signed the contract, and placed it in the return envelope. If they wanted to doubt her, let them. She wasn't solving math problems anymore. She was solving them. But just as she sealed the envelope, her phone buzzed again. This time not from Clinton Vance, but from a local reporter holding a sealed court document from Marlena's past, one that could unravel everything she'd just built. The next morning, Marlena walked into Vance Tech's Northern Virginia campus with a signed contract in her purse and a court document hanging over her head. The text from the local reporter was still burned into her memory. "We found a sealed juvenile record. I'm giving you a chance to comment before this runs. Call me." She hadn't responded. Not yet. She had work to do. The glass lobby gleamed under artificial skylight, buzzing with quiet ambition. Every corner of the open concept workspace screamed innovation. Translucent meeting pods, rows of minimalist desks, data dashboards hovering in holographic displays. Marlena, in a tailored blazer over her familiar navy blouse, felt the shift immediately, not just from cafeteria to corporate, but from being invisible to being hypervisible. No one told her where to sit. No one welcomed her with balloons or cupcakes. A few heads turned, several eyes lingered, whispers buzzed at the edge of her hearing. "That's her, the math woman. The viral lunch lady." She passed 2 employees who stopped mid-conversation the moment she walked by. Their laughter returned after she'd passed, louder now. Her temporary desk was positioned near the systems optimization wing. A white placard on her glass divider read, "Marlena Briggs, Executive Consultant, Research." The font was corporate clean, the title ambiguous, just enough to make it sound important, without explaining what she did. Her first day included a tour. a system orientation, and 3 back-to-back meetings. All of them polite. All of them awkward. In her first meeting, a senior analyst named Peter Langdon introduced her to the room by saying, "This is Marlena, Clinton's special project." No one laughed. But the implications sat heavy. Later, in a brainstorm session on AI routing systems, she offered a solution that merged spatial modeling with real-time human behavior forecasting. It was elegant, simple, and efficient, but the lead engineer responded with a forced smile and said, "That's one way to look at it. Maybe we could circle back to basics for everyone else's sake." Everyone else. That phrase echoed all day. It wasn't just her ideas that were questioned, it was her presence. During lunch in the cafeteria, a different world than the one she once ruled. She sat alone at a corner table. When 2 interns approached with their trays, they stopped short after seeing her and diverted to another seat. Later that week, a well-dressed black receptionist leaned close and whispered gently, "You're not imagining it. This place smiles at you with its teeth clenched." Marlena nodded once. She already knew. Corporate racism didn't wear badges. It wore tone. It wore passive resistance. It hid behind HR memos and vague feedback like, "You might consider adjusting your communication style. You're coming off too assertive for your level. We love your passion." But it could be intimidating to others. The week after she submitted her first internal white paper, a report that projected a 17% savings by changing a core logistics assumption, she received an email saying her tone was too academic and might alienate senior stakeholders. The sting wasn't just in the dismissal, it was in the pattern. Her ideas worked, but they didn't belong to her, not in their eyes. In one meeting, a white male engineer explained her own solution back to her, slower, louder, and with small edits that diluted its effectiveness. When she pointed that out, he raised his eyebrows and said, "I didn't mean to offend, just trying to help you package it better." Every day she earned a little more silence. Not because she stopped speaking, but because the room stopped listening. The only person who spoke to her directly and without pretense was Zaria Len, a Korean-American lead programmer who had been at the company for 6 years. Zaria didn't offer false comfort. She offered data. "They never said anything when Ethan showed up late every day for a month," Zaria told her one afternoon. "But when I wore a hoodie to a Friday meeting, I got pulled aside for being too casual." Marlena stared at her. "So they're consistent." Zaria smiled. Bitter. Consistently selective. In a private one-on-one with HR, Marlena brought up a list of incidents. None major, but together, undeniable. The HR rep, a woman named Candace, smiled patiently and responded with practiced empathy. "We're so sorry you felt that way. We don't tolerate bias here. We're looking into a more inclusive communication workshop for Q4. No promises, no accountability, just the cold comfort of being filed away." That night, she sat in her apartment, the unopened court envelope still on her kitchen counter, and wondered if any of this was worth it. The office looked sleek. The badge was shiny. The salary was more than she'd ever imagined. But it didn't stop the exhaustion. It didn't stop her from coming home and wondering if brilliance would ever be enough to silence doubt. She opened the envelope. Inside, a clipping from a 2001 newspaper. Her mugshot at 19 years old. The headline, "Local teen arrested after altercation at library." She remembered that day. A white student had shoved her in line at the public library, called her trash, and told her to go back to the projects. She'd shoved back. The police had arrested her. No charges were filed. The case was sealed. But now, someone had unsealed it. She closed the envelope and slid it into her drawer. She had no intention of hiding, but she needed to move carefully now. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that one of her coworkers had been recording. Not her, but them. It started as a joke. A junior developer named Wes Carter had been documenting the microaggression bingo in his Slack group chat. Snippets of offhand racism, disguised as office banter. But last week, during a closed-door strategy meeting, he'd recorded something very different. A group of senior engineers had been discussing Marlena, not her ideas, but her presence. "She makes the rest of us look dumb," one had said. "Clinton only brought her in for PR optics," another added. "I give it a month. She's got the whole black woman savant thing going for her. Wait till she actually has to deliver." They laughed. One voice had added, "We should start documenting her failures, just in case this whole thing blows up in our faces." That part had made Wes flinch. He didn't like Marlena. He barely knew her, but something about that comment hit wrong. So he sent the recording to her, anonymously. No note, just the audio file. She listened to it once, alone in her car, with the parking lot lights casting shadows across her dashboard. Every word felt like a knife in silk, smooth, sharp, and designed to bleed her in places no one would see. She closed her eyes, hand on the steering wheel, pulse pounding. It wasn't shock, it was confirmation. All this time, she'd thought her silence in meetings was subtle. Her exclusion, accidental, her suggestions dismissed out of misunderstanding. But now she had proof. She wasn't imagining any of it. They were waiting for her to fail, preparing for it. That night, she didn't sleep. She got to work. She wrote a memo, not just defensive but surgical. She attached her models, tracked changes, timestamps. She built a timeline of every idea stolen, reshaped, or repackaged. She included citations, results, performance metrics, and at the bottom, one chilling line. If this is how you treat one of us, in the open, I can only imagine how many of us you've buried in silence. She was ready to release it, but she didn't send it to HR. She sent it to Clinton Vance, directly. No greeting, no subject line, just her name and the file. Hours later, Clinton's assistant called her back, not with a meeting invite, but with access credentials to the company's internal network and a message. Clinton says you now have authority. Do what needs to be done. The audio hit the internet like a match to dry paper. It started with a tweet. Anonymous, no caption, just a 90-second clip. Within hours, it had over 2.3 million views. In the grainy audio, laughter echoed across a sterile meeting room. Voices, all male, all white, tossed barbed comments like darts. She's a feel-good story. That's all. If she stumbles, we just spin it. Say we took a chance. Let her crash and burn. People forget these things in a week. Honestly, she's just a PR stunt. Clinton's little diversity project. The tone wasn't casual. It was calculated, the kind of casual cruelty reserved for spaces that never expected to be heard. Within an hour, someone traced the audio to a file stored on Vance Tech's internal chat archive. Wes Carter had uploaded it days ago, not to whistleblow, but to document bias quietly. He hadn't leaked it, but someone else did. And once it was out, it couldn't be pulled back. News outlets ran the headline all morning. Exposed. Vance Tech execs mock viral math genius. Call her a PR stunt. The backlash was instant. Social media lit up like wildfire. Public figures, journalists, and activists demanded accountability. PR stunt trended alongside fire them all. More disturbing were the screenshots that followed. Slack messages, internal memos, all showing how Marlena had been discussed behind closed doors. And not just by strangers. Some of the very people who had shaken her hand, smiled at her, nodded politely in meetings, had written things like, "She's too loud. She doesn't get how we work here. I give her a month." Within 24 hours, the story eclipsed its origin. It wasn't just about Marlena anymore. It was about tech culture. It was about corporate racism dressed in meritocracy. And Clinton Vance, the man who had lifted her up, was suddenly under fire himself. Reporters asked the same sharp question across every network. If Clinton truly supports Marlena, why was this culture allowed to exist under his nose? When Clinton finally emerged, it wasn't with a press release. It was with a video. No polished lighting. No PR polish. Just him. Seated in a plain office. Sleeves rolled up. "My name is Clinton Vance," he began. "And I've built this company on the belief that genius comes from anywhere. I brought Marlena Briggs into this company because she's one of the smartest systems thinkers I've ever seen. What you heard in that recording wasn't just racism. It was cowardice."
Vision.
He paused. "And here's what happens to cowards who hide behind corporate walls. They lose their jobs." He leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "As of this moment, Marlena Briggs has full internal authority to remove anyone she deems complicit in this behavior, regardless of title. Effective immediately." The video went viral within minutes. Not everyone believed him. Some called it performative. Others said he was trying to save face. But one thing was clear. Marlena wasn't just the center of the story anymore. She was in control of it. Her email blew up. Journalists wanted quotes. Activists wanted endorsements. Former employees came forward with stories, not about her, but about how they'd been treated in similar ways. But Marlena didn't respond to any of them. She sat in her office, blinds drawn, staring at the names on her screen. People she passed. Every day. People who had shaken her hand. Only to shred her in private. Her hands hovered over the keyboard.
This wasn't revenge.
This was surgery.
Cutting out rot before it infected everything else. She started with 4 names, not just the men in the audio, but the ones who had stood silent in those rooms. The ones who laughed softly, didn't speak up, then went back to their desks like nothing happened. Her list was quiet, precise. When she emailed it to Clinton, he replied with a single sentence, "They're gone. You need anything else?" She didn't respond. But by noon, the entire building had shifted. 4 senior staffers terminated without a word. No goodbye emails. No exit interviews. Just empty desks, closed Slack accounts, and tension thick enough to suffocate. The board was stunned. Some applauded. Quietly. Others panicked. If she could remove VPs, who was safe? A few even tried to reach out to her directly. One message read, "Can we have a coffee to discuss how to move forward together?" She didn't reply. Another said, "I've always respected your work. I hope we're still good." She deleted it. That afternoon, Clinton's assistant called. "The board has requested a meeting. They'd like to understand your decision-making process." Marlena didn't hesitate. "Let's give them one." The conference room was full. Directors, department heads, legal observers. Marlena walked in wearing a charcoal suit, her curls pinned back, carrying a single folder. She didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table and opened the folder. "I know some of you want to know why those names were on the list," she said. "So I'll explain." She pulled out the first document, a Slack transcript. Laughter. Code words. A digital echo of racism in tech terms. Then an email, passive-aggressive language, hidden bias framed as performance concern. Then, finally, an anonymous complaint from a junior black developer who had quit 6 months ago, citing a toxic silence in leadership. She laid them all down, like evidence in a trial. These weren't isolated comments. She said, they were culture, and culture is built by people. No one interrupted. "I didn't fire them because of what they said in one room," she continued. "I fired them because of what they allowed in every room." A VP shifted uncomfortably. "Don't you think we should have had a say in this process?" She turned her eyes toward him. "Did I have a say when I was called a stunt?" He looked down. After the meeting, several staffers approached her privately. Some in support, some trying to align themselves with her now that the tide had shifted. But one email arrived that night. Anonymous from an internal server. "You're making enemies fast. Careful who you trust." She stared at it, the glow of her screen reflecting in the window of her new high-rise apartment. She wasn't scared, but she wasn't naive either. Her authority was real, but so were the shadows. This wasn't just a company. It was a system that had learned how to survive on silence, and now she was disrupting its food chain. What no one knew, what no one could know, was that she had one more name on her list. Someone who hadn't spoken, hadn't written anything offensive, hadn't laughed in the recordings, but had approved every policy that kept voices like hers out for years. Someone who looked progressive in public, but held meetings behind locked doors. Someone on the board. She had proof. A set of internal memos. One dated 4 months before she was hired. It read, "Optics matter. Fans needs a redemption narrative. Let's find a diversity candidate that gives us media currency without challenging internal culture." The name at the bottom? Chairwoman, Deborah Linde. The woman who had introduced her at the corporate event with the words, "Marlena reminds us what untapped potential looks like." Now Marlena knew what she looked like. A polished face masking systemic design. And this time she wouldn't just send an email. She scheduled a closed-door meeting with Clinton. When he entered, he looked at her with cautious respect. "What's next?" Marlena slid the memo across the table. He read it once. Then again, he didn't ask where she got it. He just sat back and said, This changes things." She nodded once. "Then let's change them." 3 days later, the board convened an emergency vote, and Marlena walked into the room holding a second list. But this time, it didn't just name people to be fired. It named who would replace them. And the first name at the top was someone no one expected. The boardroom was silent when Marlena walked in with the second list. She didn't carry a binder or a laptop, just a single manila folder. The quiet confidence of her steps unnerved the room before she even spoke. Chairwoman Deborah Linde sat rigid at the head of the table, flanked by a dozen executives and legal advisors. Clinton Vance stood slightly behind, arms crossed. face unreadable. He hadn't spoken to Lindy since reading the memo, the one that exposed her push for a diversity candidate with media value. Marlena had given him the proof. What he chose to do with it would define the room. "Let's begin," Lindy said, tapping the table. "Ms. Briggs, you've requested this session. Please proceed."
Marlena set the folder down and opened it.
"This list," she said evenly, "is not about revenge. It's about responsibility." Tension rippled. "My first list addressed those who mocked me," she continued. "This one names those who enabled them. The ones who laughed along, who stayed silent when they heard hate, who documented bias, but never reported it." Several board members shifted. One cleared his throat but said nothing. "This list includes 3 directors, 2 HR leads, and 1 member of the DEI committee, who actively buried complaints." She laid out the pages, one by one. Printed Slack transcripts, annotated emails, meeting logs, each name followed by time-stamped evidence, not of violence but of compliance. The room was frozen. Lindy finally spoke. "This is extreme. You're proposing a restructuring of nearly 1/3 of our upper management." "I'm not proposing," Marlena said. "I'm informing." Another executive scoffed. "You're not CEO." "No," she replied, looking directly at Clinton. "But I have executive authority, granted by the man who is." All eyes turned to Vance. He stepped forward slowly. "I stand by Marlena," he said, voice low but firm. "And I will sign off on the restructuring." Gasps rippled through the room. Lindy's face went pale. "This will cause instability," she warned. "We'll lose investor confidence. Staff morale will plummet. Stock—" "It already did," Clinton interrupted, "because we hid the rot instead of cutting it out." No one responded. Marlena continued. "I'm also naming replacements, people who were passed over for years, people with ideas and integrity, who've been ignored because they didn't fit the culture." She handed over the second half of the list. Names of junior staff, marginalized engineers, even a black female programmer who had once been let go for being too passionate. One name stunned the room. Wes Carter. The junior developer who had leaked the audio. Marlena listed him as the new director of ethics and internal transparency. "Wait, he's barely 30, one board member blurted. "He's also the only one who didn't laugh," Marlena replied. The vote was swift and public. Within hours, Vance Tech's internal portal posted the leadership changes. 12 resignations, 6 promotions, 5 internal transfers, and in a move that sent shockwaves through the business world, Deborah Lindy was replaced as chairwoman, effective immediately. The announcement went viral. Headlines exploded. Lunch Lady Clint's house, and the boardroom. Briggs' bold move reshapes Vance Tech overnight. Silence is complicity, a new era in corporate accountability. Social media called it unprecedented. Marlena moves trended for 2 days. Students across the country shared videos of themselves walking out of classes in protest of bias, holding signs that read, "Believe Black Brilliance," and "Genius has no dress code." But the victory was short-lived. Because progress, when made by black hands, rarely comes without punishment. Within 72 hours, backlash began brewing in darker corners of the internet. Investors accused Vance Tech of identity politics. A few clients, quiet but powerful, began pulling contracts. Anonymous op-eds accused Marlena of corporate bullying. And then came the boycott. A conservative podcast called her an activist plant and launched the campaign, Backlash to Briggs. Within hours, protesters appeared outside Vance Tech's offices, holding signs that read, "We want engineers, not agendas." Briggs is bad for business. Stop woke capitalism. Fox News aired a segment titled, "Math or Manipulation? The Marlena Briggs Effect." The stock dropped. That same week, 3 shareholders filed an inquiry, demanding to know if Marlena's authority had violated corporate governance norms. Inside the company, whispers turned to fear. People who had once congratulated her stopped making eye contact. Zaria Lynn, her one ally, warned her quietly, "They're starting to see you as a threat, not just to bias, but to stability." Even Clinton looked strained in their next meeting. "You did the right thing," he told her. "But the board's in damage control. They want to minimize exposure. We might need to reposition your role, maybe move you to R&D. Quiet the noise." She looked at him, hurt flashing for a moment. "You said to do what needed to be done." "I did," he replied. "But this is bigger than you now." She stood. "No. It's exactly my size. They're not reacting to instability. They're reacting to accountability." She walked out before he could respond. But even she didn't see the next blow coming. 2 days later, while reviewing performance simulations, an alert popped up on her phone. Anonymous tip. Leaked court document. Circulating on Reddit and Twitter. She opened the link. Her photo. Her full name. And beneath it, bold font. Criminal history: Marlena Briggs' hidden past. Assault arrest at... There was no context. No nuance. Just a single scan of a police report from 2 decades ago. Her mugshot. Eyes wide. Young, stunned. The word assault circled in red. No mention of what led to it. No mention of the racial attack that provoked it. No mention of the dropped charges. The internet didn't care. The comments were immediate. Knew she was a thug. Why didn't she disclose this? This explains the aggression. All that math, but still ghetto. The story spread faster than the videos ever did. Mainstream outlets picked it up. One anchor phrased it as a concerning revelation about a celebrated tech figure. Marlena's inbox flooded again, this time with speaking cancellations, rescinded interviews, and silent withdrawals. Even her most vocal defenders paused. Clinton's assistant called that night. He wants to meet tomorrow. Emergency session with legal and PR. He's concerned. Marlena sat in her apartment, the glow of her phone cold against her skin. The victory she'd carved, the truth she'd fought for, it all now rested on a decision made 20 years ago. A moment of survival, now twisted into a weapon. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't cry either. But she remembered her father's voice again. The world don't like when we rise, baby. That's when they go digging. Not for truth, just for dirt. She took a deep breath. Then she opened her laptop and started typing. A message to her team. A message to the public. But more importantly, a message to herself. Because they could twist the facts. They could smear her name. But they couldn't rewrite what she'd built. And they definitely couldn't erase what she was about to do next. Just as she prepared to publish her response, her phone buzzed. This time with a name she hadn't heard in years. Jordan Crenshaw, a student she once quietly helped during a school scandal, had found security footage from the day of her arrest, and what it revealed would flip the entire narrative. The headline wouldn't leave her screen. Exclusive: Marlena Briggs, the violent past behind the viral genius. They ran the mugshot like it was fresh. Like it wasn't 20 years old. Like it wasn't already sealed, buried, and legally expunged under Virginia's Second Chance Act. Marlena stared at the photo. She barely recognized herself. 19. Wide eyes. Jaw clenched. Skin bruised on one side. The photo had been taken hours after she'd been arrested for defending herself. But none of that made the news. The article didn't explain how she had been shoved first, how the boy who attacked her used the N-word twice, loud enough that even the library staff turned, how Marlena had simply pushed back, only to be grabbed by police before she could even speak. The charges had been dropped, the records sealed, and yet somehow, here it was, resurrected and rebranded as a warning. She closed her laptop. Her breathing was shallow. Her phone buzzed again. Emails, mentions, retweets. You can't erase character. This is who she really is. Violence always finds its way out. She looked around her apartment. Quiet, untouched, still. But inside her, the storm had already begun. This wasn't just slander. It was surgical. Someone wanted her undone. She opened her drawer, pulled out the envelope again, the one mailed to her weeks earlier with the same court document. Someone had been planning this for a while. They'd waited, timed it, waited until she was too visible, too celebrated, too powerful. And then they struck. Later that morning, Clinton called. His voice was clipped. "We have to talk." She met him in his private office. Minimalist, glass-paneled, always too quiet. He didn't say hello. "I have legal breathing down my neck," he began. "They want to know why you didn't disclose the arrest." "I didn't disclose it," Marlena replied slowly. "Because it was sealed. And because I didn't do anything wrong. They're framing it like a lie of omission." She narrowed her eyes. "I didn't lie. I survived." He sighed, running a hand over his jaw. "Look, I believe you. But the board is nervous. They want to know if we're facing exposure." "Exposure to what?" "The truth. To liability," he corrected. "Bad press, loss of sponsorships, investor pullout. You've become a symbol, Marlena. And symbols are fragile." She stood, quiet fury hardening in her chest. "So that's all I am now? A fragile symbol?" "I didn't mean it like that." "No," she said, cutting him off. You meant it exactly like that. He didn't respond. She walked out before the silence could turn into excuses. The next 48 hours were brutal. Every network ran the story. Pundits debated her past like a chess piece. Anchors used soft phrases like alarming revelation and credibility concerns. A conservative outlet released a segment titled, Math Genius or Masked Menace. They called her violent. They called her unstable. They questioned if she belonged in corporate leadership at all. Even people who once defended her began retreating. Public support waned. Interviews were canceled. A university that had invited her to speak quietly retracted its offer, citing shifting optics. Marlena watched her reputation unravel in real time. Not for what she had done, but for what she had survived. It was a lesson she thought she'd learned already. That black women were never allowed to outgrow their pain. Society didn't see redemption. It saw residue, and it weaponized it. The final blow came when a school board member from her old district publicly commented, "Perhaps we should have vetted Ms. Briggs more thoroughly before celebrating her." Celebrating her. As if her worth had been a collective miscalculation. Marlena sat alone that night, watching the city lights flicker outside her apartment. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't spoken. She just listened to the hum of the heater, the faint buzz of her fridge, the soft crackle of a world that wanted her brilliance but not her humanity. Then her phone buzzed. She almost didn't answer. The caller ID read, Jordan Crenshaw. It took her a second to place the name. Then she remembered, 10 years ago, Blue Valley High. A freshman with wide eyes and a stutter who always stayed after lunch to help her clean. He'd been accused of stealing a teacher's tablet. Everyone assumed he was guilty. Marlena had found the real thief. A classmate who later confessed but she'd never taken credit. She just made sure Jordan stayed in school. Now he was calling her. She answered, "Hello, Ms. Briggs?" His voice had matured but the nervous edge was still there. "Yes? It's Jordan. From Blue Valley. I saw what's happening online. I think I can help." She sat up. "What do you mean?" "I work at a law firm now. Intern. I'm in records digitization. Last week I pulled an archive request from the county library system. Something caught my eye." There was a pause. "I found footage from the day you were arrested. The library had security cameras. No one knew it existed because it was never submitted as evidence. But I found it. I have it." Marlena felt the air leave her lungs. "It shows everything," he continued. "The shove. The slur. You pushing back. It proves you didn't start anything. That the arrest was wrong." She covered her mouth, eyes burning. "You're sure?" "I'm looking at it now," he said. "And I already made a backup." A long pause followed. Then he added, voice quieter now, "You saved my life, Miss Briggs. I've waited 10 years to return the favor." She couldn't speak. "Do I have your permission to release it?" he asked. "We can go through the right channels. But the world needs to see it. They need to know." She swallowed hard. "Yes," she whispered. "Release it." By morning the footage was live. It started slow. Just grainy black and white video. A line of students waiting at the circulation desk. A white teen pushing Marlena. A confrontation. His slur clear in the audio. Her instinctive pushback. The officers swarming her. Ignoring him entirely. No resistance. No aggression. Just shock on her face as she was cuffed. The video was undeniable. And this time the world saw. Hashtags flipped overnight. Marlena was right. Defend black women. Context mattered. News anchors backtracked. A prominent host opened her segment with, "We owe Marlena Briggs an apology. And more than that, we owe her justice." Think pieces exploded. The racist reflex of America's redemption blockade. How one video changed the narrative. Even Clinton called. His voice was hushed. "I didn't protect you the way I should have," he said. "I let the board pressure me. I let fear get ahead of facts." She didn't say anything. He added, "I've reinstated all your speaking engagements. The board has formally cleared you. And we'd like to offer a public apology. On camera, with you." "No," she said. "No, I don't want your apology," she replied, calm but firm. "I want your platform." He paused. "I want to speak. Not about algorithms. Not about stocks. About what happens when you try to silence a black woman with truth on her side. You'll have it," he said quietly. "The whole platform." That night, Marlena stood in front of the largest camera she'd ever faced. Not for a math solution. Not for a clapback. But for truth. She looked straight into the lens, every inch of her story written on her face. I was 19 when I was arrested. Not for a crime, but for reacting to one. My reaction made them uncomfortable, so they punished me instead of the one who started it. She took a breath, and 20 years later, they tried to punish me again. Not because I failed, but because I didn't, because I excelled. Her voice didn't shake. When black women rise, the world doesn't ask how, it asks why, as if our genius needs permission. She paused, then added, and for the record, I don't need your permission. I never did. The room was silent, but the world wasn't. The speech spread faster than the smear ever had. And this time, no one could stop it. The day after the speech, her inbox filled with hundreds of messages, but one stood out from the White House communications director. The president wanted to meet and offer Marlena something no cafeteria worker had ever received before. The video had already gone viral, but it was the man behind the video who truly brought the nation back to her doorstep. Jordan Crenshaw wasn't a name the public recognized. Not yet. But to Marlena Briggs, that name held more weight than all the headlines combined. She remembered him instantly when she saw his face during a CNN interview. Older now, in a navy suit that didn't quite fit his frame, his hair pulled into a tight coil, and a legal badge clipped to his pocket. The caption beneath his image read, "Law intern releases exonerating footage in viral genius case." But to Marlena, he was still that quiet freshman, who never spoke above a whisper. The kid who returned his lunch tray with both hands. The boy whose eyes darted nervously every time someone raised their voice.
The one they almost destroyed.
And the one she had quietly saved. Back then, Jordan had been accused of stealing a teacher's tablet. No evidence, no motive, just a misplaced device, and a room full of assumptions. He'd been pulled from class, interrogated by 2 staff members, and told he was facing expulsion. No parents called, no formal hearing, just 2 adults telling a black child that his future was already shrinking. Marlena had found him crying behind the vending machine near the cafeteria's side door. He didn't say much, just "I didn't do it" over and over again. Like a loop stuck on panic. She didn't ask questions. She listened. Then after her shift, she checked the security footage herself. She wasn't authorized, but she had watched the monitors enough to know the schedule. The tablet had been picked up by a student in a hoodie, not Jordan. She burned the clip onto a USB drive, slid it under the principal's door, and said nothing. The next day, the school dropped the charges. Jordan stayed enrolled, but no one ever said why. He'd never forgotten. And now, a decade later, he was returning the favor. The interview played on every major network. Jordan sat forward in his chair, voice firm despite the nerves in his eyes. "I was 15 when Marlena Briggs changed my life," he began. "She didn't do it for credit. She didn't ask for thanks. She did it because it was right. And now I'm doing the same." He went on to explain how, during an internship at a Richmond law firm, he discovered an archived transfer order from the county library system, one that listed a long-forgotten batch of VHS to digital conversions. Among them, the footage from Marlena's 2001 arrest. "I cross-checked the date, requested access under our firm's public inquiry permissions, and I found the tape," Jordan explained. "It clearly shows Marlena being shoved first. The aggressor uses a racial slur. She reacts defensively, not violently. The arrest was wrong, and burying that truth, that was worse." His final words shook the internet. "You can try to rewrite a black woman's future by distorting her past, but not on my watch." The video clip ended with a still of young Marlena, shocked, handcuffed, eyes wide, juxtaposed with the modern image of her at the whiteboard, marker in hand, brilliance on full display, side by side, injustice and triumph. The reaction was instant. Major news outlets retracted previous headlines. Blogs that once called her unstable issued public apologies. Educational advocates praised Jordan for his courage, and hashtags changed again. This time not as a trend, but as a movement.
We see you, Marlena.
"Thank you, Jordan. Protect black women." Her phone lit up with texts, missed calls, and press requests. Clinton left 2 voicemails. Gloria Ellsworth sent flowers. A civil rights attorney offered to represent her pro bono against any party that had violated the expungement order. But Marlena ignored them all. She sat by her window, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't anxious. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even relieved. She was grieving. Not for her reputation, but for the years she spent shrinking herself to avoid this very war. For the moments of brilliance she buried. For every black woman who never got her tape unearthed, who was erased in silence. She called Jordan that evening. He answered on the first ring. "Miss Briggs? You don't have to call me that anymore," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. "You're grown now." He laughed. Just once. "Old habits." "I saw what you did," she said. "And I don't have the words." "You already gave them to me," he replied softly. "You just didn't know it." They spoke for 20 minutes about school, about law, about memory. At one point she asked him why he didn't just send her the footage in private. "I wanted the world to know," he said, "because hiding the truth is how they win. And because it wasn't just about clearing your name, it was about what they did to it." The media storm turned, but Marlena didn't step back into it right away. She spent a week offline, no interviews, no statements, just her notebooks, and long walks through the city, rediscovering the stillness she'd lost somewhere in the chaos. But the silence didn't last. Because justice, once released, demands momentum. Gloria Ellsworth showed up at her doorstep unannounced, coat wet with rain, holding a plain white envelope. The White House reached out. She said, "They want you to speak." Marlena blinked. "At what? A panel?" "No," Gloria said, handing her the envelope. "At the Rose Garden. Inside, an invitation with an embossed seal. Presidential recognition for educational and technological excellence. Guest of honor, Marlena A. Briggs." Her knees buckled slightly. "They want to award you," Gloria said, "in front of the nation. Not for going viral, not for surviving, but for redefining genius." Marlena sat down slowly, staring at the letter. For so long, she had fought just to be seen. Now the highest seat of power in the country wanted to put her on a pedestal. But pedestal placements come with their own dangers. "They'll want a soundbite," she said. "They'll want a sanitized version of me." Gloria nodded. "Then don't give it to them." Marlena looked up. "You think they'll still listen?" "I don't care if they listen," Gloria said. "Just make sure they remember." The morning of the ceremony arrived with clear skies and a chill in the wind. Marlena stood behind the podium in a long gray coat, curls free around her shoulders, a simple necklace her father once gave her resting at her collarbone. The audience included lawmakers, students, media, and members of the public. Clinton sat in the front row. Jordan sat beside him. When the president introduced her, the applause was loud, but her silence as she stepped up was louder. She paused, then leaned into the mic. "I'm not here today because I'm special," she began. "I'm here because I was doubted." She scanned the crowd. "I was doubted because I looked like someone the world doesn't trust. Because I worked in a cafeteria. Because I wore a smock instead of a blazer. Because I didn't come from a place they measure success by." Her voice didn't rise. It deepened. "They told me I was a fraud, that I couldn't be brilliant and black and poor and right. They told me to smile, to stay grateful, to be quiet. I refused." The silence from the crowd was full, focused. "I didn't fight for attention. I fought for accuracy. Because being unseen is one thing. Being misunderstood, being erased while still breathing, that's another." She paused. "So let me be clear. I am not your miracle. I am not your exception. I am what happens when you stop asking black women to prove they're worthy, and start asking the system why it refused to see them in the first place." Thunderous applause erupted. And somewhere in the crowd, Jordan wiped his eyes. This time there was no smear campaign waiting, no rumor ready to unravel her. Just truth, raw, unpolished, and impossible to ignore. Marlena didn't bow. She stepped back, and for the first time she wasn't retreating. She was rising. Backstage, as the crowd thinned and handshakes were exchanged, a Harvard official approached her quietly, with a doctorate offer and an invitation that would spark the next cultural uproar. A black woman, with no degree, asked to teach at the world's most elite university. The news broke like a lightning strike through the quiet halls of Blue Valley High. White House honors former cafeteria worker, Marlena Briggs, with national recognition in education and innovation. The article ran front page in the Blue Valley Post, accompanied by the iconic image of Marlena at the Rose Garden podium. Hand raised, eyes steady. Some faculty stared at it in stunned silence. Others looked away, as if the face on the page belonged to a stranger. In the break room, a group of teachers clustered around the newspaper in disbelief. "Wasn't she the lunch lady?" someone muttered. "She used to work here. That can't be the same woman." "It is, Janice," One of the veteran cafeteria workers snapped as she walked past. She just never needed you to notice her to be brilliant. The district scrambled to respond. They couldn't afford to be the school that once humiliated a national figure. Parents were already asking questions. Reporters were digging into old staff rosters. Student activists began tagging the school's social accounts with "We worked with genius." The superintendent called an emergency meeting with the school board. "We need to do something," he said. Visibly. Publicly. "This can't be our legacy." Someone suggested a mural. Another floated the idea of renaming the math wing. The oldest board member cleared her throat. "What about a statue?" A beat of silence followed. A statue? For a cafeteria worker. It was radical. Or depending on who you asked, it was overdue. The proposal triggered a local firestorm. At a town hall meeting, emotions erupted. "She was disrespected here for years." A young black parent shouted, "Now that she's famous, y'all want to act like you loved her the whole time?" "We're not saying we were perfect," the school board president replied carefully, "but we're trying to honor her now. Doesn't that count for something? Not if you're just trying to protect your own image." The local news station aired a segment the next day with a split screen. Footage of Marlena in the cafeteria, wiping tables, and her recent White House speech. The caption read, "From lunch trays to national stage, a town's reckoning." The story sparked nationwide conversation. But in Blue Valley itself, the air felt strange. Divided. Yard signs began appearing across the neighborhoods. "We see you, Marlena. Honor the genius they ignored." And others, more cautious. "Respect is earned, not given." No statues without standards. On social media, alumni posted stories, some authentic, some desperate to attach themselves to Marlena's shine. "I remember Marlena. She was always so kind. Helped me pick up my tray. Others weren't so generous. She served food. Now she thinks she's a scholar. She never had a degree. What's she doing giving speeches at the White House?" The backlash wasn't new. It was just louder now, because silence was no longer an option. Inside the school, a movement began to grow, but it wasn't led by teachers. It was the students. Inspired by Marlena's story, a group of juniors launched the visibility campaign, printing out black and white posters that read, "Who else have you ignored?" They plastered them across trophy cases, classroom doors, even the staff lounge. The administration removed them by noon. The next day there were twice as many. Then came the sit-in. Dozens of students sat quietly in the cafeteria for 3 straight periods, refusing to go to class. They held signs with equations written in marker, crossed out with red slashes. A local reporter asked one of the student leaders, a black girl named Uriah Caldwell, why they were protesting. "It's not just about Marlena," she said. "It's about who gets seen as smart, who gets the benefit of the doubt, who gets to make a mistake without losing everything." The footage of Uriah speaking went viral. Overnight, the protest became national. Marlena's name returned to the headlines, not as a symbol but as a seed. The students weren't protesting to protect her legacy. They were protesting because her legacy exposed their reality. The school district rushed to organize an official award ceremony. They framed it as a redemptive gesture, a celebration of Marlena's brilliance and resilience. The event was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Flyers were printed. A press release was written. The principal sent out a school-wide email. "Join us in honoring one of Blue Valley's own. Marlena Briggs, proof that greatness begins anywhere." Some teachers rolled their eyes. Others rehearsed praise for the podium. The local news station set up a special live feed. Reporters practiced their lines. "Today the town of Blue Valley embraces one of its most inspiring stories." But as the day approached, something felt brittle. Not wrong, just uncertain. Would she come? Had anyone actually asked her? 2 days before the event, a student reached out to her through a public contact form on her website. The message was short. "They're doing this for themselves, not you. If you come for us, not them." Marlena never replied. She simply read it, twice, and left it marked unread. The day of the ceremony arrived with a rare warmth in the air, a strange brightness for early spring. Inside the school auditorium, folding chairs filled fast. Faculty, former students, school board members, local press. Even Gloria Ellsworth was spotted, in the 3rd row. The stage was set. A framed plaque waited on an easel. Beside it, a student-built sculpture, half math formula, half rising flame. A gold chair with a name tag had been placed in the center of the stage. "Reserved Marlena Briggs. The room buzzed with anticipation. At exactly 2:00 p.m., the principal stepped to the mic. Today we are proud to celebrate the journey of one of our very own. He spoke for 5 minutes. The language was careful, heavy with buzzwords, light on accountability. When he finished, the room applauded.
Then came the moment.
And now, the woman who reminds us all that brilliance wears many uniforms. Marlena Briggs. The crowd stood. Cameras turned toward the entrance. But no one entered. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Whispers began to ripple. Someone checked their phone. No text. No update. No show. The principal leaned into the mic, forcing a smile. Perhaps she's running late. But she wasn't. Marlena was 50 miles away, seated on a wooden bench outside a STEM magnet school, where she had just given a private workshop to a group of black girls, learning calculus. She sat in jeans and a soft cardigan, hair in a low bun, notebook open on her lap. A student beside her asked, "Are you supposed to be at some big thing today?" Marlena smiled. "I already am." She watched as the girls debated the best method to simplify an integral. The joy in their faces. The clarity. The recognition. There was no stage here. No cameras. No applause. Just truth. And it was more than enough. Back in Blue Valley, the auditorium slowly emptied. The gold chair remained untouched. Aria Caldwell stood in the back row, arms crossed, a small smile on her lips. "She's still teaching," she said to a nearby friend. They just forgot to ask where. By that evening, word had spread. Marlena no-shows Blue Valley ceremony. Some called it petty, others called it powerful. But her silence spoke louder than any acceptance speech. She wasn't rejecting the town. She was rejecting the terms. You don't get to mock someone into the shadows, then hand them a spotlight and expect them to shine on cue. Marlena had chosen something better, and for once the town had to sit in the echo she left behind. The next morning, an op-ed from Marlena appeared in the New York Times titled, "Visibility is not victory." And within hours, Ivy League institutions across the country began publicly vying for her as a visiting professor. Until she answered with just one word, "No." The headlines began as whispers. Where is Marlena Briggs? Genius gone silent. The black woman who refused the Ivy League. In the weeks following her Rose Garden speech, and her quiet no-show at Blue Valley's performative tribute, Marlena disappeared from public view. No follow-up statements. No speaking tours. No social media posts, not even a quote in the op-eds analyzing her impact. Her inbox went unchecked. Her voicemail filled up. The White House sent a framed photo of the ceremony. She never picked it up. She vanished without apology. And in her absence, the world began doing what it always does. When a black woman stops performing, it filled the silence with assumption. The media speculated with subtle cruelty. She may be emotionally overwhelmed. Sources suggest she's burned out. A gifted mind, but not built for the pressure of public life. Some tried to frame it as political. Others suggested psychological collapse. Even well-meaning voices got it wrong. She's resting. She's rejecting the system. She's protesting in her own way. But Marlena wasn't doing any of that. She was building. In a borrowed office space above a small community bank in Richmond. No sign on the door. No public address. Marlena worked quietly alongside a single assistant and 2 volunteers. No PR team, no advisors, no titles. She had redirected the first round of her corporate salary, the residuals from her viral footage, and a portion of the Rose Garden appearance fee into something almost nobody knew existed. It was called the Briggs Code. Not a nonprofit, not a mentorship club, not even an official foundation yet. Just a fund. Raw. Unbranded. Intentional. A scholarship pipeline for black girls interested in math, data science, coding, and systems thinking, but structured in a way that sidestepped every traditional academic hoop. No GPA requirement. No personal essay. No recommendation letters. Just one question. What problem do you want to solve? And how would you begin? Applicants submitted video responses, diagrams, even voice memos. Marlena watched each one herself, sometimes twice. She didn't rank them. She recognized them, because they were versions of her. Bright minds. Overlooked, misread, mute. By mid-May, the Briggs Code had already funded 5 girls in 3 cities. A 14-year-old in Birmingham, who designed an app to track which neighborhoods received faster ambulance response times. A junior in Newark, who created a predictive model for school lunch waste. A homeschooled sophomore from Jackson, who reverse engineered a broken tablet and wrote her own guide to repair it. No press releases. No social shares. Just quiet deposits into futures that weren't waiting for permission. Clinton Vance didn't find out until someone forwarded him a local article buried in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Former tech executive launches anonymous fund for black girls in STEM. The article didn't mention Marlena's name, but the numbers, the language, and one quote from a recipient. The lady with the notebook said I was already enough, made it obvious. He read the article 3 times. Then he made a call. It went to voicemail. He texted, I heard what you're doing. I want to help. Not with money. With platform. No response. 2 days later, he sent a formal request through her assistant. The answer came back handwritten. I don't need help. I need protection. It stopped him cold, because he knew exactly what she meant. In her world, exposure came with extraction. Help came with ownership. And platform came with a price. But Clinton wasn't trying to manage her. He wanted to match her. So he waited. It wasn't until a mutual acquaintance, Zaria Lynn, reached out personally, that Marlena agreed to meet. They sat at a quiet tea shop with low lighting and no Wi-Fi. Clinton didn't pitch. He just listened. Marlena laid it out clearly. I've seen what happens when the machine takes a black woman's story and turns it into content. I'm not going back into that. I don't want you to, Clinton said. I want to resource what you're already building. On your terms. She looked skeptical. Since when does a billionaire accept someone else's terms? Since I watched the system try to bury the smartest woman I've ever met. She paused. I'm not trying to be a hero, she said. I just want to shift the starting line. Clinton nodded. Then let's move it together. He offered her an operational grant with 0 strings. She declined. He offered server space, data protection, and back-end tools to help process applications securely. She paused. Then said yes. She didn't need funding. She needed infrastructure. By early summer, the Briggs code was expanding, not loudly but deeply. 20 girls now. 10 more interviews lined up. But still, Marlena refused the spotlight. No press, she reminded her team. Not even local. If someone finds us, it's because they see us, not because we waved our arms. The work was slow, pure, personal. Every award she declined. She wrote a private letter to the girls instead. One read, they called me angry, then brilliant, then broken. I was none of those things. I was just unseen. You are not. I see you already. But the silence couldn't last forever. Because movements built in shadows eventually cast their own light. A high-profile podcast episode titled Missing Genius, Where Did Marlena Go?, began climbing charts. The host, a former tech investor, traced her trajectory and ended with a line that caught fire.
Maybe we didn't lose Marlena Briggs. Maybe she lost us and decided she was better off without the noise.
The quote hit Twitter, then LinkedIn. Then a panel of Ivy League deans mentioned it during a streamed education summit. That's when the outreach began again. Only this time, it wasn't just panels or speaking invites. It was offers of power. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all requesting Marlena as a visiting fellow. An honorary professor, even offering joint leadership in new equity and STEM initiatives. And one MIT offered her a blank check. Anything she wanted. Any title. Any project. She ignored all of them. Until a single envelope arrived at her office. Handwritten, no postage, hand-delivered. Inside, a 2-line note. We won't ask you to teach. We'll ask you to design what teaching should be. Clinton. She didn't respond right away. She just stared at the words. Because she knew what he was really saying. We'll stop asking you to fit in. We'll let you build what should have existed all along. And for the first time, she didn't feel threatened by the offer. She felt invited. But before she could decide, something else reached her desk. A letter. No name, no sender. Inside, a scanned image of her high school cafeteria, the table she once stood behind. Drawn over it, a red X. Underneath, in thin typed text, you left us. But some of us haven't forgotten what you were. She stared at it. The old fear returned, not because of the threat, but because of the truth embedded in it. They hadn't forgotten, and some never would. She wasn't just building futures now. She was walking through the ruins of her past, and not all of it had been forgiven. The next morning, her assistant handed her a sealed legal notice. A former staff member from Blue Valley High was filing a defamation suit, claiming her rise had come at the cost of his reputation. And the trial would be public. The envelope lay unopened on the mahogany table in Marlena Briggs's modest home office. It was thick, cream-colored, and bore the crest she recognized immediately, the crest of Harvard University. The kind of invitation many dream of, few expect to decline. Yet Marlena stared at it for a long moment, her fingers lingering at the seal. She thought of her old cafeteria uniform at Blue Valley High, the gloved hands, the unseen presence, the assumptions. She thought of every boardroom where she had to whisper so as not to appear intimidating, of every meeting where her ideas were stolen or dismissed, of every headline that called her viral, as though brilliance was a disease. And then she swallowed. She opened the envelope with deliberate calm. Inside, a formal letter offering an honorary doctorate in educational innovation and systems thinking, plus an appointment as a visiting professor, a title, resources, and a front-page opportunity to anchor the prestige of Harvard's new diversity in STEM initiative. They wrote of her transformative work, her inspirational journey, her impact on marginalized communities. They used words she had never applied to herself. Trailblazer, visionary, exceptional. Her chest tightened. She drafted a reply, first in her head, then on paper. Thank you for the generous offer. After careful consideration, I must respectfully decline. She paused. Her pen hovered over the next line. I won't lend my name to places that only value black minds when they go viral. She paused again, then sealed the letter and scheduled pickup. When Harvard's press office released the news, Marlena Briggs declines honorary doctorate, the world hesitated. A storm of commentary erupted. Some applauded her integrity. Others questioned her decision. Talk show hosts asked, why turn down Harvard? Columnists wrote, is this a missed opportunity or a bold stand? Marlena watched it all from her couch, wearing a simple chambray shirt and her favorite jeans. She drank tea. She didn't post. She didn't comment. She simply sat in silence. The country paid attention now not because she stood on a stage, but because she refused one. Within days, the op-eds changed tone. One headline read, what happens when brilliance doesn't need institutional approval? Another, Harvard's loss our gain. Social media became both a battlefield and a classroom. A black woman scholar posted, she refused the pedestal because the pedestal didn't change the ground. Another, the system wanted her for optics. She wanted the system to change. Students at Ivy League campuses held informal gatherings. Flyers appeared. Do you really want visiting professor or visiting change agent? Her name lit up campus forums, not because she accepted a title, but because she declined it. Back in her workspace, Marlena opened a ledger for the Briggs Code. More girls' applications, more prints of their ideas, a neural net model for early flood warning. In Atlanta, a feminist game design group from Oakland, a drone routing program, combating food deserts in Detroit. She thumbed through them, her mind flicking between mentor, strategist, advocate. A soft knock interrupted her. Clinton Vance's assistant stood at the door. Mr. Vance would like a quick call, she said. Marlena raised an eyebrow. Now? Yes, ma'am. She stepped outside, phone pressed to her ear. Marlton, Clinton began, his voice always sounding like midnight. I saw the news, your answer went viral in a way the video never did. My answer, she said quietly, is still being shaped. Good, he replied, because this changes everything. I have a proposition. She glanced at the stack of mentor journals. I'm building. I don't need more propositions. This isn't business. It's policy. I spoke with someone in the White House. They want you. She halted. They want me. Yes. Not just to speak, Marlena. To help craft. To sit at the table. Her heart skipped. She placed a hand on the doorframe. There's one condition. She waited. The podium doesn't schedule you. You schedule the podium. She closed her eyes for a moment. I'll consider it. Good. I'll send details. She hung up and leaned against the wall, absorbing the weight of the words. Not because she finally had access, because now they knew they needed her terms. A week later, she boarded a flight to Washington, D.C. Quietly, no entourage, no press, just one carry-on bag, and the scribbled notes she'd been refining. At the White House entrance, she was escorted through halls she'd read about in history books. Important faces passed, polished corridors, security badges, cameras flashing outside. Yet inside, she felt strangely calm. The noise outside her mind had quieted. She walked with memory, of lunch trays, of whiteboard scribbles, of unseen night. In the Oval Office, she met the President of the United States. He greeted her with warmth and a small smile.
Miss Briggs, he said, thank you for coming.
She nodded. Thank you for inviting me. No jokes, no fanfare, just mutual respect. The President gestured toward a document on the desk. We'd like your help designing a national STEM equity initiative, not just access transformation. She studied the paper. Headlines: Federal STEM Equity Bill 2026. Key goals: increase underrepresented minority enrollment, fund historically black colleges and universities, build new research hubs in underserved regions. She leaned in. I'm not interested in being part of the system. I want to help remake it. He nodded. Then let's start now. They spoke late into the evening, about metrics, attitudes, accountability, about why so few black minds are funded, why so many are celebrated only after virality. At one point the President asked, "Why did you decline Harvard?" She looked up, unflinching. "Because they wanted me as a trophy. I want them as partners." He didn't disagree. They talked about power and promise and why institutions fear those who carry truth without submission. When the meeting ended, she stepped into the corridor, there flashing a strobes of press and journalists. Yet the moment felt private. She carried the document in her hand, heavy with implication. Later that night, back at her hotel, she sat on the window ledge, overlooking the National Mall. The silhouette of the Washington Monument glowed in the distance. She pulled out her phone. One unread message: dinner tomorrow, White House staff, agenda, national rollout. She exhaled, looking at the city lights. For so long, the story had been about her. Now the story was with her, and it wasn't finished. Just as she was preparing to leave, her phone beeped with a secure message from Harvard's president, offering her not just a teaching position, but the directorship of their entire new Innovation Equity campus. But under one condition: she must accept a non-disclosure agreement that silenced her from speaking publicly about race for 5 years. The morning air in Washington, D.C., had the usual crispness for early autumn. But inside the East Wing of the White House, the atmosphere crackled like electricity. Media crews stacked cables along the marble floors, security officers nodded curtly at each other, and young students from across the country filled the seats, their eyes bright and restless. At the heart of it all, Marlena Briggs stood backstage behind the velvet curtain, clutching a speech she had handwritten in longhand, folding and refolding the pages until her fingers ached. She touched the embroidery on her blazer, the simple MB stitched in silver thread, a quiet homage to the cafeteria uniform she once wore. In that uniform she'd been invisible. Now she felt hypervisible, the spotlight poised like a question. Her heart hammered, but she remembered what her father had told her long ago. They'll always question your mind, baby, because they can't see it. She exhaled slowly and stepped forward. As she walked out, the cameras swiveled, the chatter fell away, and she met the gaze of the president, seated with his staff, surrounded by thousands watching live. She nodded politely as she approached the podium, the American flag behind her, the presidential seal beneath the mic. Yet beneath the polished backdrop she saw hundreds of eyes, students like her, skeptics like the critics, and the world waiting. She began softly. "Good morning. Thank you. I've never thought of myself as a spectacle." Her voice carried through the chamber, clear and measured. "I thought of myself as a person who solved problems. Yet here I am, standing for more than a solution." She paused, scanning the crowd. There were teachers, technologists, policymakers, and children wearing backpacks. She spoke directly to them. "When I served lunches, I learned more than portion sizes. I learned that invisibility is the first barrier. When no one calls your name, you begin to believe it yourself." A murmur rose among the students. Her voice hardened slightly, yet remained calm. "You may ask, how does a cafeteria worker become a systems thinking consultant in tech? The answer is simple. I was never given permission to be smart. I just decided I would be." A ripple went through the audience. She continued, "But permission isn't the point. What society grants you is never enough. What matters is what you take." She moved from personal narrative into broader truth. For too many black minds, brilliance is only seen when it becomes viral, or when it becomes convenient. We are asked to prove we belong, to overserve until we are exhausted. We are taught to tone down, simplify, fit the space with smaller voices, smaller accomplishments. We are told, be consistent, not disruptive. She paused and looked at a young black girl in the front row, whose eyes were wide, the hush in the room deep. We are not a trend, Marlena said, voice softly rising. We are not an experiment. We are not the proof of your diversity statistics. We are the answer you never asked, the question you should have asked. The applause was strong, but she didn't wait. She pressed on. Genius is not an accident. It is not fair. It is refused. And if you think someone like me is an anomaly, you're proving the problem. Her words hung in the air. Across the room, a policy advisor scribbled notes. A teacher dabbed her eyes. A reporter stopped typing. She shared data. The number of high schoolers from marginalized backgrounds who abandoned STEM by sophomore year. The drop-off rates for Black women engineers. The percentage of funding that went to institutions that looked like her former lunch uniform, not like her current blazer. This wasn't just personal story. It was systemic evidence. We must stop asking for permission to join the table, and instead question why the table was built behind a glass wall. We must restructure. We must open access, not just entry. She lowered her voice, quieter but fierce. A hush. An expectation. The crescendo built. Then Marlena delivered the twist. With your permission, it's time to dismantle the myth of the single genius. The audience leaned. I'm not here because of one viral moment. I'm here because hundreds of invisible minds preceded me, and because many more will follow. This speech isn't about me, it's about them. She paused, letting that land, then added, starting today, I'm donating the speaking fee to a fund for Black girls in STEM, and I invite the nation to join. Not because I became visible, but because they were always visible. A ripple of surprise and cheer. She stepped aside for a moment, as staff brought forward a sleek tablet projected on stage. On it, a live feed map lit up. Dots across the country marking the first recipients of the Briggs Code. Headlines scrolled: Birmingham, Detroit, Newark, Jackson. The audience rose in standing ovation. Marlena returned to the mic. To the girls watching, your problem matters. Your questions matter. Your thinking matters. And your name should too. A hush. A tear formed in her own eye, rare for her to show. The president stood. The students stood, and for once the room held its collective breath. She finished. When you give seat to someone like me, you change one life. When you change the system for someone like me, you change everything. Let this be the moment we stop celebrating exceptions and start rewriting expectations. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Reporters shredded notes. Students stood and cheered. She smiled, not for show, but for truth. Backstage, after the ovation, she walked through the corridor with a lone aide. Reporters surrounded her, phones thrust forward, headlines in waiting, but she moved calmly. No hurry, no signature, no moment stolen. At the corner, a young Black girl, maybe 12, jumped forward, shy, clutching a notebook. The girl looked at Marlena, eyes wide. Marlena knelt down. The girl's voice was barely audible. I want to be just like you. Marlena's reply, better. The girl's face lit up. At that moment, a whisper of uncertainty drifted behind them. An aide showed Marlena an envelope marked urgent, confidential. She slipped it into her pocket without reading. She didn't stop walking, but the weight sat heavy. Because in the world of systems and spectacles, the stage is never neutral. And when you walk off a stage like that, everyone assumes you still belong to it. As Marlena stepped into the limousine that would take her back to her office, the door closed, and inside the envelope she had tucked away was not just a formal invitation. It was a federal subpoena demanding her testimony in the upcoming congressional hearing on STEM equity. They called her a fraud before they ever called her brilliant. They saw her skin before they saw her mind. And still she rose, not to be exceptional, but to make sure no one like her ever had to be. If you've ever been underestimated, type yes. If you believe in justice, subscribe if this broke your heart.